Welcome back. We are going to start right into the third portion of the CTE regulation changes, the adjustments. And one thing we've discovered this morning is that some of the microphones that the presenters are using, people are having trouble on the webcast hearing them. So I guess you have to have a certain, I guess it's a 5-6 inch distance for people who come up and testify, and then also as a reminder to the presenters that you probably need to pull up your mics a little further, maybe. No?
We tested it.
Okay. You too. Thank you. All right. Guilty. I have the gavel, remember. So. All right, Julius, would you like to just give a little summary again, not just a brief summary of item number 3? Yes, Mark.
Before we start, I wanted to, I noticed there's some, an incorrect reference on stamp page 6. You would make reference to the, let's see, it's about...
And that's attachment A relative to the regulation changes.
Yes. Under the second part, the fund release process, on small letter B, the line below that, you refer to section 1859-193D, which is the section you omitted. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're crossing out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, Julius?
Yes. Our third item for discussion today is to discuss changing the expenditure reporting procedure to provide a mechanism to remit savings and interest earlier. Annual expenditure reports for the Career Tech program are required beginning 1 year from the date of the first fund release until the project is complete. The project is considered complete and ready for final expenditure audit when either of the following occurs. The district submits the final expenditure report indicating 100% of the project is complete and the detailed listing of project expenditures, or 4 years elapse from the date of the fund release for a high school project, which these Career Tech projects are for high schools.
Okay, so right now the savings and interest is collected at the time of closeout, and the proposal is to have that done at the time of the expenditure report, and then have an adjustment made at the original time it was, which was at the final expenditure audit, right? Okay.
Correct.
Yes, Mark.
We have an overall problem with how interest is reported, when we've been talking about that with our with the auditor, OPSC auditors, with regard to our savings modernization savings audit. But that notwithstanding, we continue to have problems with the calculation of the interest, how it's calculated. And if you're expecting us to calculate it and write you a check for it, then you guys are going to verify whether or not that calculation is correct or not. It seems to me to become problematic, because that's exactly what happened with us on one of our projects. So, and now we're in this argument about how much more money do we owe. We got to write another check. And so it seems to me that if you're going to insist on using the PMIB interest rate, which is another whole other issue for us, then I think it needs to be OPSC that tells us how much interest we owe, so that we can get it right the first time.
Okay.
Would you like to just return the principal?
That would be fine with me as well.
No, because that would be easy, and then let them come back and say what the interest is.
I think this is a much more broad question about interest in general, not really specific to this, because right now this is just to carry the same kind of process that we have. We're not really actually even changing anything on the interest. It's just the time that we're changing. So I think I hear your concerns, Mark, but I don't know that we we're planning on changing anything in terms of the way the interest is calculated for the purposes of this item.
Correct.
Because you're talking just in general, for not just CTE projects?
I am talking in general, but with specifically, I think this is problematic. There's nobody else that agrees with me? It's problematic for us to continue to write checks for small amounts. If you guys are going to be the ones to tell us whether or not our calculation is accurate, then we have to go back and reconcile and write another check to you if it's not the right amount.
Okay.
To me, that seems problematic.
I'm not sure I would agree. I think to a certain extent the district is going to have the information regarding the date the funds were deposited in the county fund. You're going to have the records related to the interest rate over time and the dates of expenditure and the time of the balances, the declining balances. I mean, to ask OPSC to do that and have them tell you, I'm not sure how, the district has to supply the information to a certain extent to them to process this. And I'm not sure we want the state coming in and telling us, here's what you owe based on what we think. Because it would be a round argument going the other way. And I know this isn't.
Well, we did that, but it didn't pass muster when it got to OPSC. They questioned it, and then now are billing us for more money. So now we have to, it just seemed to me that there ought to be, maybe that's what I've suggested isn't right, but maybe there's some way that we can come to an agreement on what is owed so that it's done and it's done once and it's over with.
Perhaps we can come back at the next IMP, it's specifically for this, for CTE, but just in general interest in the way it's calculated.
Yeah, and if you can, maybe we can talk in between now and the next IMP committee. I'm sorry, Margie.
No, it's fine. It can be difficult to calculate interest depending upon when you get your interest calculation from the county, even if it's right from the county. Oh, sorry, Jeff. But we take a stab at it, and then at closeout, OPSC comes back and says, you owe us money, you don't owe us money. We're fortunate. We spend almost all our money, so we give almost nothing back. So the interest calculation really isn't a real big deal for us. But I don't have a problem at final expenditure report if I think I owe back money on CTE, giving it back. I mean, this is an easy one for us as long as you give us the bid and 10% contingency on the front. I don't have any problem with cutting you a check for what I have left over at the end, because I probably might have something left over, I
think you're okay with the proposal?
I think so. I don't know who else is having problems with interest besides LA. We're pretty good at getting, you come back at the end and we dispute what the audit says, and, usually we cut you a check, so.
Bill and
I think I'm pretty much okay with this. We just want to, the proposal is that this would be at the point of filing the 100% project expenditure piece, so there won't be any more expenditures on the project. So, again, districts don't want to get caught at some point where you're asking for money back before we have all our expenditures in. So as long as it occurs at that point and there's a fairly straightforward process to do it, I think we support the goal of getting money back into the program to fund other projects. So if it's simple and easy to do that, that's what we're supportive of.
Okay. Any other? Sorry.
Finance supports this one as well. We take into consideration, of course, the interest concerns that LA Unified has, but overall, we support at the time of the expenditure report returning the funds.
Okay, Lyle? Could you, I think we need you to come up because we're having trouble with our microphones. Sorry.
You just want to see if I can still walk.
That's right.
Last meet, LA Unified, what is the interest rate that you're going to use on this? Because in the item, it refers to a regulation section that says that the interest rate is the PMIB rate. And that's a punitive rate on districts, by the way.
That's what we currently do right now, right, guys?
No.
Is that a new addition?
Well, even if it is, it's still punitive. You're extending it to this program, it's a punitive action. I want to know why you're using that rate. You get PMIB rates in your money, Bill?
My understanding was it was the rate that we were actually earning at the county on the investment.
That's why I'm asking the question, because in here it says
And we would be
PMIB rate.
supportive of this item if it was a reflection of the actual rate that district is earning on funds in deposit at the county.
Since you require us to put it there.
That's correct.
But I can tell you that that's not what OPSC is using on the example I was just referring to. They use the PMIB rate and calculated it themselves. It's inconsistent with the regulation that says your interest should be calculated based on what the district has earned, not what OPSC could have earned on their money had they not given it to the district.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was for the loan, but sorry. Marsha, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to emphasize that we would like to hear such concerns, and we can go back and investigate how our the law and regulations are structured to see if we have any authority to do a different interest calculation, similar to how we did this under the ERP, where we asked the district to return the savings and calculate the rate based on the rate that is actually being earned by the district in that account while the money is in the account. So we can take that back and explore that with respect to this. And if we do end up implementing some type of what we were envisioning as either a supplement or a schedule to a Form 5006, similar to how IRS has schedules, lettered schedules, we would spell out, we would vet all those all those provisions here at the IMP, and we would include a detailed list of instructions for the districts on how to complete that form so it's as easy as possible and as crystal clear as possible. Well, we just ran out of time to be prepared for that discussion today, so we plan to bring it back with more details.
Is that an answer that says, unless the law requires us to use the PMIB rate, then you're going to go back and use the actual interest rate one?
No, I don't think that was, well, I want to speak for you. Go ahead, Marsha.
I think we just need to take the time to go in and explore that and do all of our research.
Is the answer that if you have the authority to use actual interest rates?
We'll come back and discuss this. Obviously, this is something we have.
Marsha raises a really good point, and I was in my head going back to the ERP program too, because this is where we do this just like this. And the rate there is the rate of the deposits at the county treasury.
But this item says it's PMIB.
I think it's a really good.
I think that's a very valid point. Well, I appreciate you bringing it up.
Where
does it say it, Lyle? I'm sorry, I'm trying to find that.
I don't know. I'll find it and let you know.
We do reference some regulation sections that lead back to that under our authority, but under our staff comments, we're not presenting any kind of final proposal right now with interest calculation in respect to this. But we do provide, and as we always do, pertinent regulation sections for all of you to reference under our authority section. So perhaps that's where it's buried, but under our staff comments, as you'll see, we're not presenting any final proposal on the interest calculation at this time.
Okay.
Under authority, next to last sentence says, provisions identified in 259-106.9. You look at that section, it says.
Got it.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Margie, did you?
Yeah, I just, thanks for pointing it out, Lyle. I would just hope that OPSC would come back and be reasonable about the interest calculation. You're requiring us to deposit at the county. We could only earn what we earn at the county, and that's what we should return to you if we have any savings. And again, those amounts are deposited quarterly. Usually we get those amounts quarterly, and then they're allocated by our business office. So it's it's always in arrears, and it's always problematic. And right now it's not a lot of money. So it's almost nothing, as a matter of fact. But it really should be at the rate at the county treasury where you require us to deposit it in Fund 35. Thank you.
We appreciate the comments. Like I said, we're going to bring this back and have another discussion on the actual interest. Right now, it was just to bring out the idea of capturing these savings, not at the closeout, but at the expenditure report. But we can definitely come back next IMP and get really into the details of the interest calculations and maybe have some of our fiscal folks here as well to help us out.
All right, thank you very much. Anything from members, anything additional from members or the audience on this issue? Appreciate Mark and Lyle bringing that up, the interest calculation, and we'll be sure to bring that back, of course. But we are in agreement. I'm going to assume that the actual adjustment should be made at the final audit, and the savings would be remitted at the time of the reporting. Is that correct? Yes? Okay, well, concede that Mark is it's not an agreement, but okay, but appreciate the point about the calculation, and we will relook at that, and I appreciate that, bringing that up. So are we ready to go on to the next item? Does anyone have any more
We'll bring this back for further discussion.
All right, thank you so much. The next item is the new facility hardship request checklist and improved appeal request form. This item was scheduled to be heard at the last meeting, and it was pulled at the last minute, so we're just bringing it back up today. I think you've, I want to point out that it has been revised since the last time it was posted from the last hearing. We've had some very productive conversations with some stakeholders and made some changes to the form and the instruction. So to give clearer direction to staff on, to the stakeholders and to the districts on what staff typically relies upon to process these type of requests. And I think before it was characterized as a requirement, and that was inadvertent, because that is not, it is not in regs, and we're not proposing to change regs at this time. So if staff could make their presentation, please.
I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Karen Mandel, Supervisor of the Policy and Specials team.
Tim Hegedus, also Office of Public School Construction.
Don Littlefield, retired militant with OPSC Policy and Specials team.
Okay. Well, we're going to get started. The reason we're here to present this item is the intent is to improve the process for submitting requests for facility hardship.
Microphone.
Not loud enough?
Closer. 6 inches.
I can hear you fine, Masha. Okay, how's this?
Better.
Okay. So, for facility-related threats to the health and safety of students, districts can apply for facility hardship funding. But these projects, they vary greatly. Each one is unique. There are some that are somewhat standard, but it's pretty common to have them come through things that we've never seen before, and they're so unique that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all guideline for a complete submittal package like we might have for other programs within the SFP. So, and there just can't be, because the project circumstances are each so different, and that's just the nature of facility hardship. So in the absence of clear guidelines of what's typically needed to demonstrate a facility hardship case, and to establish other criteria are met, like cost estimates for the minimum work necessary, we've been getting a lot of applications, a lot of submittals that have very little supporting documentation. And sometimes there's just a description of the situation and a hope that it might be a facility hardship. This hasn't been the district's fault, hasn't been the architect or consultant's fault. Often they don't know what to admit because there is no standard, and like I said, because each of these circumstances are so unique. But the problem with this is that some of these projects sit on a workload for 8 months, a year, 2 years, as we go back and forth with the districts and then, the architects and other professionals, trying to get the right documentation to support the request. This is a hardship for the districts, as they were hoping that they had a case and they didn't know exactly what they needed to submit. And sometimes after all the back and forth, it even turns out that the circumstances don't qualify for facility hardship, and that's something that no district wants to go through, especially if they're spending money on professionals to prepare this documentation for them. So the intent of this new checklist is to provide guidance to the districts regarding what's typically used to support facility hardship requests. And this list on the checklist is not exhaustive. There are circumstances where there might be other documentation that are offered in support of the district's case. Also, there are cases where not everything on that list is going to be required. For example, if the Division of State Architect is out at a site and doing a visit and they notice some severe structural deficiencies and they dictate what minimum work needs to be done, the district does not need to go out and get a design professional, structural engineering report to concur with that. If DSA already notes it, then that's enough. So that's a case where you wouldn't need an industry specialist report. There's also a stakeholder that mentioned a case where there was some buildings in rubble. And in a case like that, would we need DSA to say that there's a structural problem? No, it would seem ridiculous to require that. So, and in some cases, we've funded some facility hardship projects with arsenic in the soil. One of the items on the checklist is photos. Now, send me photos of soil. I don't know if I can see arsenic or not. So anyway, the point is this isn't an exhaustive list, and there are plenty of unique cases where not all of the items on the list are going to apply. So this isn't a list of requirements. It's what's typically offered in support of facility hardship cases. It's important to note that the facility hardship program requirements have not changed. There's no proposal to make it change. The way we process applications, or these facility hardship applications, has not changed in 10 years or even before the SFP. And it's not proposed that it would be changing now. The only thing that's happening now is just to streamline the submittal process so that districts have a better idea of what they should probably be submitting, and also they can see what's typical, and when they don't have one of the things that's typical, they can think about it and let us know why they don't have it, and we can say, oh, okay, that's fine. So our hope here is that this makes the processing of applications more expedient too, so we don't have incomplete applications sitting on the workload for a year or two, going back and forth, trying to determine if this is even a facility hardship case. So we're hoping that this will increase the likelihood of getting submittal packages with the needed documentation, and so we can get the project to the board and approved as soon as possible. We have no set timelines like we would with other SFP programs, but if a complete application comes in with all its ducks in a row and it's very clear, it could be, this is going on record because I'm saying it in the mic, but possibly 90 days, really quickly, or it could take half a year, could take longer than that. These are all very unique cases. So that, and of course, the facility hardship projects get priority processing. So even if they didn't have everything and we had to send it back, if they got it and came right back, we'd get it to the next possible board. There's no date in line waiting. It doesn't sit on an analyst's desk for 2 months before they look at it, because it's not part of that sort of date order received. It's just immediate, as soon as possible, urgent health and safety situation. So Don Littlefield is going to go through the step-by-steps of this request sheet that we've developed. There's also another item on here, it's just kind of tacked on, it's sort of related, but it's something that didn't maybe warrant its own item, and that's the appeal form, SAB 189. There's just going to be proposed a minor change, which is just an addition of a section where the district can indicate what's the basis of the request. So that helps the district clarify exactly what their appeal is, and it helps us too in quickly processing it too, because we know exactly that the law or the reg or the policy or even something as simple as, hey, you did it for that district, LA Unified got it, can we get it? So
Wait a minute.
just picking a random district that we deal with from time to time. So that's the intent of that change. But as for there's one other thing that's minor, is that currently and for the past 10 years, for a district to submit a facility hardship request, they've been submitting an appeal form, which doesn't give us much information at all. It just says, describe your request. And the partially completed 5004 application for funding. And that's been confusing for some districts, and it doesn't make sense to us too, especially for conceptual approval. Why are you submitting an application for funding? And if it's not really an appeal, why are you submitting an appeal? And this has not made sense for a long time. So we're hoping this new facility hardship request sheet will be a big improvement just in streamlining and in terms of logic.
Okay, my understanding also is that if it is an appeal, then you must submit the 5004 as well is that correct? It's not for the request, just the appeal.
Okay, to clarify, for when there's a request for funding for facility hardship, if it's not at the conceptual stage, but it's the funding stage, then in addition to the facility hardship request checklist, yes, the application for funding also, the 5004 has to be submitted, of course.
Okay, thank you.
And one more thing. There is no certification to this. You're not certifying. There's a lot of information collected that helps with to process quickly. There's some information asked about, but none of it is the district certifying to. It's just supposed to be a tool to help the districts clarify their request in detail and to help us quickly process it. Well, we have to know who filled it out and who we're supposed to.
Question about the 180, you slipped this one in, right? The
189?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So the 189 form that's in the packet on the back page, you said you can't tell what's new and what's old on it.
I was going to go through that with you.
I'm sorry. Okay.
We'll go through that in a little bit. But it's the middle section with a few check boxes. That's what's new. But Don will go over that.
Okay.
So,
all right, we'll hold our comments.
Okay. So that's the background. That's the overview.
Overview question?
Go ahead.
If you have some questions, yeah, sure.
Facility hardship, the total applications, how many, from your perspective, really have a problem in terms of processing? Is it a substantial amount, or is it a small amount? I mean, if you had,
It's there enough that it's a problem, but proportionately, it's not a large number.
Most don't sit on the workload for 1 or 2 years, but there are enough that go back and forth that it's taking a lot of time and the district's time and staff hours too, that we can hopefully avoid.
Juan, did you? I'm sorry, Deborah? Richard?
Just a question. When I look at the form, having been a district that went through a facility hardship, you may remember, to me, this seems to lengthen the process. I mean, mine, I called, I think I talked to Bruce, told him what was going on. I had somebody out at the site fairly quickly, it seemed, maybe, I don't recall that well, it's been a number of years, but it seems to me that OPSC came right out, took a look, and at least I got a nod that you are correct, go ahead and continue, or not. Here it seems like you're doing a lot of paperwork before you folks even give us the nod to do it.
Well, we hope it's not too much paperwork. I mean, going through it, it's going to be just identifying the information that we'd be collecting during analysis anyway. So I hope it's not anything additional. And also our services are still available to, you're welcome. It's not like our phones are closed off. You can call us up any time. We can still do site visits.
You would still do site visits right away?
Well, we hope. I mean, there are restrictions on travel now, but...
So then maybe not.
But that wouldn't be a consequence of the new submittal process. It's just...
Let me just jump in here real quick. We still encourage that as soon as you think that you have a problem, give us a call. Don't think that you have to fill out the form before you can talk to us. Please give us a call. We'll walk you through the requirements. We'll help you get there. Okay, but we want to be able to give districts, here's the blueprint of what you need to come in the door. And if you're not sure, or if you think you have a situation, call us. We'll help you. We'll walk you through it. But when we get an application, we want to have at least the majority of the components already there so that we can start doing an analysis. And we'll help you get there. But what we're trying to avoid here is basically having projects where they sit on the workload list for 2 years. And sometimes it's because we're waiting for information, we're trying to work with the district, but these are health and safety issues. And when I see them on a workload for a year, for 2 years, I'm worried. If it's a health and safety issue, why isn't it being processed? And is it something that we're holding up? So I want to try and avoid that. I want to try and expedite the processing of these applications as quickly as possible. So this is a tool. This is something that helps districts. Hey, this is what you need to come in and qualify. But by no means are we saying that you can't talk to us or you can't call us to see if there's an issue, because we're always going to be available.
But it appears, I'm assuming, because I don't remember, is this all new?
So Dawn, go through that. And then,
okay, so what you're saying is, so before I do anything, I have to get an industry specialist report to bring to you, government concurrence, the corrective plan, so I'm going to be hiring folks to come out and do all of this, right?
That's the current process, yes.
Okay.
That's been the current practice, but let's...
Yes, if I could.
Sorry, just to say, Richard, did you want to say something? Okay. All right.
I guess I just don't want OPSC to get into a mode where they're, if you don't have all the boxes checked and the right things, then they send it back to you.
Yeah, that's not the intent.
No, I don't think
I just want to make, I didn't think that was the intent, but I don't want it to get to that.
All right, thank you for clarifying that on the record. Yes.
And I'll even just reiterate that those boxes on the, let's see, I guess it would be stamp page 13 under supporting documentation. Those aren't a list of required documentation, and if you don't have everything checked, don't even bother. That's not the case at all. It's just a list of what's typically used to support a request.
But your directions say this section must be completed.
Well, sure, you've got to complete the section, and then under supporting documentation, Don will get into this, but it says to check the ones that apply, and that would constitute completing the section.
If you folks would let me just take out a little scroll.
I just have
I think I'd answer a lot of your questions.
Okay, I'm sorry, Bruce, do you have a question on the overview or on the form itself? Because then Don is going to be going over the form.
I was really just going to make a comment on the form and on Deborah's question, but
okay.
defer to Don.
All right, thank you. Okay, go ahead, Don.
Just real quickly, a couple of comments. The facility hardship program, which I've worked with, I'm probably the longest tenured with that, is a very high priority to OPSC. We take them very seriously because we're talking about something that's an imminent threat to health and safety of students and staff. And they are always a priority for that reason. And the program exists to assist on the minimum level to remedy that problem and as quickly as possible. And so a key phrase in facility hardship program is the minimum to mitigate. So I just want to bring that up because it's very important, and that's what we want to provide. But it's the most we can provide because there's a threat. It's not uncommon for there to be a modernization project, and unbeknownst to the contractor, the school district, they run into problems that are outside the scope of the mod. Facility hardship has come to the rescue in the form of rehab or replacement, those sort of things. So I just wanted to kind of just give you a big picture right there. And also along those lines, before we start line by line, if you'd look at the form and you just turn to the second page, which is your page 13 and 14, you'll see upper left there's a section 1, and in the middle of the page 14 is section 2. And these two sections have just been incorporated in here to help really simplify the application process and to help the district. And my goal in my part of this has been to create something that is extremely user-friendly and that is helpful and doesn't leave a district feeling like, well, have I done enough? Am I covering all the bases? And we also have links to our website to give further detailed information. But the Section 1 and Section 2 are there because most of the facility hardships that come in as conceptual. The actual ready-to-go, right from the get-go facility hardships come in as funding items are rare. And why not? Because the district wants that confidence and assurance that the board has considered their situation and that the method they intend to proceed with is favorable in the board's eyes. So conceptual approval is a great thing, and then the district has more than enough time in the way the program is designed to follow up with that, having that confidence. So conceptual is most common, and for conceptual approval, you simply follow through Section 1 and Section 2. They both apply. But if you happen to be ready to go and you're, as if it was a new construction or a mod that was approved, final plan, CDE, etc., then you would only complete Section 1 and then a 5004. Otherwise, with conceptual, a 5004 isn't needed, and you simply follow this form and send it in with the documentation. You have a better chance of getting it right the first time, and we have a better chance of knowing exactly what you're asking for, and so that we can help you. But I totally want to back up what Juan mentioned earlier, and that is if you have a problem, we want to know about it as soon as possible. Get on the phone, send us an email, let us know, and we'll begin to work with you immediately. Again, Tim said it more than once, this is a tool, and it's meant to just assist you and to provide just guidelines more than anything else. And the required language, don't let that scare you. But I will go through the form with you now, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Right at the beginning, on page 12 in your booklet, you indicate whether it's conceptual or a actual funding request, and whether it's replacement or rehabilitation. For those of you who don't know, it's just a matter of comparing your current replacement cost, and that is a formal term in SFP, which is actually a toilet dollar per area, other dollar per area, times the area that is affected by the facility hardship. And when you come up with that current replacement cost, is the minimum to mitigate greater or lesser than 50%? If it's greater than 50%, it's a replacement project. If it's less than 50%, it's a rehab, and a rehab is treated just like a modernization project, except you don't use pupils. A replacement project is just like new construction, except you don't use pupils.
Would we know at conceptual if it's a rehab or a replacement?
Well, yes, it matters quite.
What do we know at conceptual, whether it is or not?
Oh, yes, we always
right away?
know.
I would
we
know?
always know.
Because sometimes costs go up and then it becomes a replacement, not a rehab, right? I mean,
Margie, it isn't uncommon to flirt with that 50% line a little bit. And keep in mind, if you don't know, that if it does go over 50% as replacement, it doesn't mean you have to tear down your building. A district can go forward in a rehab fashion, but it just qualifies on that way. And of course, just like new construction is 50-50, rehab is just like mod, it's 60-40. But if you're flirting with that line and you don't know, then we'll work with you.
Okay, so I don't know if because there's a couple of these that might be don't knows or maybes, like, are you suing and how much are you going to get, you know?
It doesn't happen too often.
Okay, so I just, are you suing, I mean, or is there an insurance claim and how much do you think you're going to get? You know, if you're my insurance company, they're going to say nothing, you know? But I just want to know if there's an opportunity here for some maybes or don't know, because sometimes you're right on the line. When we first had our gym that we had to tear down, we thought we actually were going to be able to fix it. And then when the cost estimates came in, we knew we had to tear it down.
Right.
So.
And that's why we ask for a cost-benefit analysis as a part of our form. If you just turn to the next page, number 13.
Yeah, Marge, I think the answer question is...
I'm sorry?
Yes, it's an estimate, and if you don't have it, then you just leave it blank.
Right.
Is my understanding.
We're totally flexible on that. You won't be hung out to dry if you didn't get it exactly right. We'll work with you. What do you want to get you there? The supporting documentation, it usually starts, we're just talking documentation. Of course, site visits, they're just arranged as quickly as possible, just to get back with Deborah. But typically, if you've discovered there's a problem, you need an industry specialist to do an analysis of that problem. With structural problems, which are the lion's share of facility hardships, that of course falls into the area of a structural engineer. And a structural engineer's report is typically necessary to determine the extent of the problem, that it indeed is a health and safety threat, and what is the minimum work required, because this is a program to pay for the minimum to mitigate. And so a structural engineer, following those guidelines, will prepare his report. And then when you see governmental concurrence on the next box, this leads into the example of DSA having looked at that, and they are the folks that are one of our resources that we turn to and say, DSA, here's what we've been presented with. Do you concur that this is a health and safety threat? Does it meet the minimum to mitigate the problem and not any more than that? And do you believe it's required work? And that's what DSA provides for us. But governmental concurrence can be many different things depending on the problem. We've had mold issues with the Department of Health. We've had health and safety issues related with road, where CHP has provided concurrence.
Okay, Don.
Do you have questions?
Yes, a second.
Yeah, and we're kind of going through this line by line, so it might be good just if we could stop at this one just for a sec, because I have a project that is flirting with this process, and the first part of the sentence under government concurrence is what I have already for a site, which is that I have a concurrence letter from DSA that there's a health and safety threat for the students. And I don't have, it strikes me that the and the second part of the sentence may be better off being down under corrective plan, because the initial concurrence that you have a threat may come well before you've developed a plan to mitigate the threat.
Sure,
so I'm kind of thinking that, in other words, I have a concurrence letter that I have a health and safety threat to students, but I don't have a plan. And DSA hasn't looked at the plan and can't represent that there's that the work is the minimum work. And so it strikes me that the second part of that sentence may belong where you sort of have it already also under the corrective plan as a subset of that. I'm just, as you look at the kind of how this form works, because, anyway.
Well, I'm not sure I'm following you.
Well, in other words, I have a school that's sliding down the hill, right? So I have a concurrence letter from DSA that a health and safety threat exists, and I have a concurrence letter from CGS that there's a landslide under my school. But I have many plans. I have potential mitigations. I have moved to another site DSA has not approved nor seen those plans, but they've already issued a concurrence letter that there's a health and safety threat. So I'm just kind of trying to separate the notion in this first part, especially at a conceptual approval, or a conceptual process of getting into the hardship program.
Sure. A concurrence letter is a letter that concurs with something. And in this case, they would concur with the industry specialist report.
Right, exactly.
And so, the cart has to come before the horse. The industry specialist in a structural issue is a structural engineer, and they would complete all those components so we could see the big picture. And then DSA, for example, would say whether they concur with that report or not.
And that's what we've done. The structural engineer has said this building is falling down the hill, and our geotechnical engineer has said there's a landslide under this building. Both of the agencies have concurred, but there's no corrective plan yet, and there's no minimum action yet.
He objects to the and.
I'm objecting to the second half of the sentence.
Okay, well, in order for conceptual approval to be made by the board, what they're approving is not just that there's a health and safety hazard. They're approving your plan to mitigate the health and safety hazard. So you've got to, maybe at this stage in your situation, you don't know, you haven't explored all the avenues, you haven't figured out which one you want to do and which one is going to be the cheapest.
Right, exactly.
And let me just interject. When we do along with the staff to the board, a conceptual approval, and that conceptual approval is very precise. We keep track of the dollars, so we know down the line, and this is coming in. We need to be aware these costs are out there because these are a high priority. And so we need to follow all the way through to know what the mitigation plan is. It's not enough, as Tim said, just to recognize that there's a problem, but we have to come up with or the district needs to present the actual plan to remedy that problem so that we can go to the board. The conceptual approval would be a funding approval in most cases because it's so articulated. It needs to be to that level, or what is the board approving? They would just give you a nod that, yeah, well, we've got a problem there, what are you going to do about it? But this is your problem, this is how much it's expected to cost. You're not held to that cost on new construction replacement, only in rehab. But it needs to be to that level, or the board can't make it something that you can rely on as a district.
And I'll mention one more thing, is that the district is not required to do the minimum work necessary. They can do more. For example, I had one district that had some structural deficiency in their gym, but it was minor, and it sounds like such a small amount of money. It was only a couple $100,000 to fix it. Drop in the bucket, right? But what they want to do is build a brand new nice gym, and they completely can do that. They can abandon or demolish their old gym that has the health and safety issue, and they can spend a lot of money if they want on a brand new gym, and that's totally fine. We just need to determine what is the minimum work necessary, because that's what the funding is going to be based on. The district is not restricted to that course of action.
May I go on the phone, or are there more questions? Okay, thank you. The corrective plan is listed next, and after that discussion...
If I could interrupt for a second, thank you. Are these questions on the immediate explanation, or?
Just to the point we stopped on the form.
Okay, all right. I think, okay, just a second. I think Richard or Bruce, nothing right now? Richard, you had your hand up first.
Hello again, Richard Gonzalez and Associates. What I'm hearing is there's two parts of this that we're trying to work on. There's the comfort level of the school district, knowing that we've got a project we can move forward on. And then there's the point in which it becomes a project that can be moved forward on. For example, this list here I see, which is a good list. allows you to proceed forward with some form of an appeal based on some application to do the facility hardship request. But a lot of districts are coming in and they're going in, I have a problem. Can you help me out here? Come out and take a look at it. Is this really a facility hardship situation? And they're concerned that they're going to have to fill all this out to come out and have some form of a concurrence as to whether there is or isn't a problem here. They can go through a lot of these different things here, but at what point is it that they need to have this completely done? That's I think, where the misunderstanding is being done, because we've got projects that have been sent into OPSC that may be sitting there because the district felt they had a facility hardship situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they got someone out to take a look at it. There's still questions. There's that fine line about, well, when is it you're asking us to take a look at it and see if there's something we can agree to at first? And at what point does it come into the Office of Public School Construction and become really a project or something that has to move forward down the road? Or are there some more questions?
Excuse me, Deborah, is that what you were referring to earlier? Okay.
So my perspective is I don't necessarily see this as a big problem at this point. I think there's a comfort level from the school districts that, hey, we have a problem. Can you come out and take a look and see if you think that this is a problem without necessarily going through every dotted I and thing here, and come out and take a look at it. Yeah, the building looks like it's going to fall off the cliff.
And we do that, and we can come out and verify the conditions that were claimed and come out and, and also just do customer service of explaining how the program works. But we wouldn't want to be assigning a project number and having it on the workload and posted at the stage where the district just feels like it might qualify.
And I fully agree with that. I think that's the way it should be done. The question just becomes, at what point does it become an application? At what point is it still discussion where everybody's still on the same page?
Well, I think that you come back to the need for a professional, an industry specialist, industrial specialist. We can't make that call. We can give you basically a layman's call on, yeah, that looks bad. But I mean, what more could we do from a staff point of view?
That's true. I mean, a district might call us up and say that there's so much noise from a nearby airport or something, and we can go out there and say, gosh, yeah, you're right, it is kind of loud. I wouldn't want my kid going here. But we would rely on an industry specialist. We would rely, in that case, on the Department of Education to tell us about the site and the suitability for it being a school site. So we would, yeah.
I think you pose a good question, but it's kind of a hard we can't really give you a specific answer.
Right.
But and certainly we can't move forward with like one or two of these items. We might need more than that. But we process these on a case-by-case basis, and to have most of these would be most helpful to us, but we're not saying that every project needs every item on this list.
And so we're really coming back to, when is the switch on and off kind of thing? It's off right now. We tell you that we've got a problem. Can you come out, maybe look at it, help us analyze this a little bit? What do you think you need to have to finalize it? Or this isn't, gosh, my God, the building's falling down. As opposed to, okay, here's the paperwork, the formality, here's the number, now you have a certain amount of time to finish it. I think that line's blurred a little bit right now, and I appreciate the fact that staff's bringing this to kind of figure out, okay, at what point do we get into the queue for a facility hardship kind of review versus when are we looking for some help and advice and direction?
Okay, thank you.
I think one of the, go ahead.
No, just real fast.
Mm-hmm.
I would, microphone. Thank you.
I'm so worked up about this, like I couldn't get the microphone. No, I'm not worked up about this. I would suggest that an architect line be added under industry specialist report. Okay, Mr. Dunstan and Mr. Savage could probably attest to the fact that our license will allow us to make a report to qualify for this.
Generalists, not specialists, though.
Yeah.
Our license will allow us to do this, Mr. Savage.
Okay. Is that reasonable or?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Can I just go back to Richard's comment? And I think that's, part of the discussion that we're having here right now, and an idea is to have most of these components, but it's hard to say which ones because there's such a case by case, and that's what we're struggling with. But we do want to see, and again, I say most, I don't know how many, how much is most, but, and that's something that we can discuss here, but some of the major components have to be in place for us to even, to start processing it in-house, internally. Again, going back to the other comments, doesn't mean that we won't work with districts before then, but to submit something, to put it on the workload list, and to have an expectation of it going to a certain board, or, near board, we need to have most of these components. Because there's such case by case, I don't think that we can give you exactly, you need to have, 3 out of 5, or, I don't know, and that's part of the struggle, because we recognize the case by case nature of these projects.
I think it would help our perspective if we just put ourselves in the position of standing before the board and saying, board, here's a school district's concern, and we want you to approve in concept for this many millions of dollars. And the board asks why, and show me the detail that supports that. If you put yourself in that position, you realize how we have to go from where you've noted a concern and how do we get there.
Okay, Deborah, did you have a comment?
Yes. Why would you go before the board without having this?
That's my point.
Well, I'll go back to my case. We did a lot of work together before you went to the board, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sure.
Right. Without this.
Well, we eventually got all these components together and were able to present a strong case to the board.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So, okay, never mind.
Okay, Chris, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to comment a little bit. So what I'm saying is this is just purely to expedite the taking of projects, of facility hardship projects to the board so that they can get approved, so that they can eventually be funded, and so that the problems can become mitigated. So in that respect, finance supports OPSC on this, and hopefully this will help expedite facility hardship projects.
That's our desire.
Okay, Dennis, and then I've seen, no? Bruce, you had your hand up and there was somebody else?
Actually, I apologize, Don. I was going to save my comments until at the end of your report, but I can't help myself, I guess.
Strike while the iron's hot.
I'm hearing what Juan says, and I really respect that. And I think it's great that OPSC wants to help people out, and I think that's the way it should be. And you're a good example, Deborah, of how that worked. But I'm looking at this from the standpoint of the vast majority, I think, of school districts out there that might have something like this come up. They go on the website, they see this form that doesn't say anything about go talk to your OPSC rep. It says, here's an application that this must be filled out, and at the end of it, your superintendent must sign this form as if it's a certification, even though it's not a certification. And I'm thinking from the school district standpoint, why would I don't know half of this stuff on here. Why would I even try to bother to file an application? I'm personally am not much of one for checklists, because I think checklists you tend to rely on them and you miss things if you do a checklist. But if this is exactly. If this is just a checklist, why is it a certification signed and everything, and why isn't it just a part of the OPSC handbook that people can go to in conjunction with going to their OPSC rep and talking about the way they should do it, like Deborah did, talking about the project and figuring it out with the help of the OPSC rep? Why does it become a required part of the application?
Well, it's worked without it so far, but it's worked.
My point exactly.
It's worked clumsily with projects sitting on the workload for a year or two. So that's the point of this, is that I don't think...
But a district, I'm sorry, but a district that, if it is in fact a district that is holding up the process, a district that doesn't have a piece of information or doesn't have the time to get that piece of information, this thing isn't going to do them any good or harm.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to do them harm because it's going to take them time to fill this out rather than going to the rep and finding out exactly what's required. I just disagree with the whole concept of this.
Well, please.
Sorry. Margie, and
Well, I
then...
think Bruce was before me. Do you want me to...
Yeah, well, we prioritize for members, but I know Bruce is out there.
Bruce, you want to go? Come on. Well, so, I'm going to agree with OPSC staff. I apologize. It's almost as bad as agreeing with LA.
Ouch.
Almost.
Let the record show.
Here's the issue. When we have an appeal, when we have an issue, we're told to get the 189 and do an appeal. And we struggled with our seismic gym, and we struggled with the process of what to pull together, and we had to hire specialty consultants to help us do it, and we did it several times and made several submissions. Now, I'm not sure that this form is going to solve the problem, but boy, it might be a good start from a blank 189, figure it out yourself. We called, OPSC came out, just like in Deborah's case, the two Tonys came out and they walked the site, and it was great, but then we were left to fill out the paperwork and try and figure out what to submit. And it did. Our application sat there and it languished because I don't think anybody knew what to do with it. So I think it's helpful. I'm not exactly sure that this is the solution, but I think school districts do need some help to know that the process isn't just filling out the 189 and then dumping it on OPSC and trying to figure out what it is. Very, very complicated. So this is helpful, but I still don't think people will know what to do with this stuff. And I think the first step is always to call OPSC, say what the problem is, see if you can get them out to your site, buy them a plane ticket. Can we do that for you guys? And get out to our site and let us see what our problem is, because it is very complicated, and just using the 189 alone is not helpful.
I just wanted to, pardon me, but I just wanted to clarify. I'm not opposed to the checklist. I think this is good. I think it's good to have a list of things that may be required, but not in this format. I think this would be good to include in the OPSC handbook as a list of things that you may potentially use, but to find out exactly what you need to do, call your OPSC rep. Don't make it as a certification that is required
we can take out the signature if that's
even as a document that is required to file an application. It's something, it's guidebook.
Clarify is a lot of the information that's asked on here is information that would be collected and needed during the process of analysis anyway. It's just so that we can get it all in one place. And if we have to write letters back and forth to find out some of this information, that's going to delay the district's project getting presented to the board. If they can check a few boxes and fill out some numbers on this piece of paper, I'd like to save us all some time.
Sorry, Don. Just a second. I just wanted to give a suggestion about perhaps we can put that somewhere in some guidance that goes with the checklist, saying, please, feel free to call your OPSC representative first and for assistance in filling out this form or finding out what documentation is necessary for your particular project. I think we can just put that language in there pretty prominently, not in like fine print or anything. So, okay. Yeah.
I want to agree with Margie, and I think in conceptual terms, I think it's important for us, it seems to make sense to have an application form for the program. In other words, right now, my understanding is you file an appeal request, and presumably I don't know the historical basis for that. Maybe you're appealing the fact that you don't have eligibility, and yet you have a problem. I don't know what it is. That's just how it went, right? So in conceptual terms, it's probably good if you have a specific program that you have an application form for the program. And so I think on that basis, it kind of makes sense to do this. And I don't know whether this is the right one and whether all the boxes are the right boxes or not, but I think the effort to have a form for which you use to apply for facility hardship is probably a decent goal and road to set down, so I want to support that. We can kick the other pieces of it around later.
Okay, thank you, and I think, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce Hancock, Gunnison Park. Margie really kind of beat me to the punch. The reason I raised my hand was really to express my support for the concept and to tell Debbie that, Debbie, my firm has gone through a number of these recently, and we have never failed to have OPSC folks come forward and do really the same things that happened on yours. So if there's some misunderstanding about that, I think Susan's suggestion, how to clarify that, it was probably a very good thing. But we were always left then after that visit with, okay, what's next? Often they told us, as much as we could remember and think to talk about out on the site. But something like this is really helpful in giving you the path. What do you do next? And also there was some comments about, where do you cross the line? Richard's comments were very on point. But we often find that really what happens is your next step is discussion with these professionals. And they can often begin to give you a sense of whether you're going anywhere or not. Is this a hopeless thing? And that costs you little or nothing. They can't always. A structural engineer can't look at a building and tell you there's an imminent safety hazard there, usually. But some of these buildings are so bad they can do that. The architects can do it as well. But my guess, all I wanted to say, speak was in support of the concept. There's nothing on this list that we have not had to go through and think about. Do we need that? Do we need this? And there's no requirement on here that I'm aware of that we wouldn't have had to do anyway. It's just that we would have had to do it after we got asked because we forgot to do it the first time. So there's a lot of different ways to do this, I'm sure, and different formats that this could take, but I think generally it's a very good step, and I think it will help.
Well, and I agree with what Susan said, Bruce, but if I were a first-time person trying to do this, I would, of course, go to this piece of paper and I would start, because I'm that anal person, okay, now who am I going to hire to do this, and I would go down and try to do it all. And I think maybe just a preface on this is call OPSC first, describe your situation, and let them guide you instead of you trying to guide yourself through something that may fly or may not fly. So.
It's very fair. Thank you. Don.
May I just remind that we have had this process on a brochure, a handout, available for years now, and it's also on our website, and you just go on there, and I basically put it together myself, always with help. But it just simply says, hey, how do I know if I have a facility hardship problem? And it's very user-friendly. It's question and answer, or what do I do? That's already on there. But the main reason that we're here today is that process still includes filling out a 5004 for conceptual and a 189 for an appeal when neither of those are applicable or appropriate. So as you observed, we need something more user-friendly that just guides the district along, and it doesn't intend to imply that, hey, fill this out, we don't want to talk to you until you've done it. But it's just a guide because you have a problem, and we want to know about it right away. We want to help you, and this gives you the big picture, and that has been on the internet for some time, but this streamlines it even more.
I think the concern that districts would have about, one concern about a checklist is, if I don't check this box, does that mean I don't get it and I'm done?
The fear factor.
No, that's a real fear. I mean, come on, that's how things work.
It says on the form, if you can't check the box, please provide a brief written explanation as to why you are unable to check the box. So.
But what if you don't know?
Say I don't know.
Excuse me, so if I say my building burned down, do I need an industry specialist report?
Just a photo.
Government concurrence?
Oh, that's a great example. Your building burned down, you maybe don't need all these things. You don't need someone to come out and tell you that your building burned down and then someone to concur that, yep, your building burned down.
I would want to know how much insurance coverage you have.
Okay, Don, you referenced that it's on the website. Is there a link that we can maybe put on here that kind of walks the district through, okay, do I have answer questions, if you answer all these questions or 1 out of 3, then, then it's just a guidance to give you more, to give districts more information on, do I have a facility hardship?
As well, to contact.
Okay, there is a link that we can maybe put on there?
Not to the checklist. The
No,
checklist is,
but
okay.
to information on a questionnaire to the extent
We
that
can put that prominently up on the sheet here, along with the the suggestion to give OPSC a call before.
Just to give them a little background and, do I not have a facility hardship? Thank you. Yes, Jeff.
I really agree. Turn it off. I really agree with Deborah's comments that we want to have a form that's user-friendly and that step 1 should be make an initial contact with OPSC, and we should say it on this checklist. The interesting thing that I saw in this form, just to kick the tires on this a little bit, is that if you want conceptual approval, which is what we want to get before we go through 100% of the hoops, we have to fill out more information on the form than we would have if we're going for our funding. We have to fill out section 1 and 2 for a conceptual approval.
Right, and with funding, you'd have to also submit the, 9-page application for funding. So.
Right. I think it would be helpful if, based on the initial contact with OPSC, there was a discussion that said you need to go through these hoops as opposed to leaving a district just seeing this. So, walking hand in hand with OPSC.
That's a good perspective. We'll do that.
Okay, Lyle.
Okay, are you ready to move on? I'm sorry.
One more.
Oh, no. What was I thinking? Hi, Lyle. Lyle Smoot, LA again. I think one of the things that, talking about this form and the requirements of it, one of the things that is a concern is the sentence on the first page in the general instructions that says, all facility hardship requests that are incomplete will be returned. That's a pretty harsh statement. Maybe there's an understanding what that means today, but 5 years from now, when Ron's gone to Department of Finance and Chris has changed jobs with him, that may not be understood. I don't see a need to have that sentence in there, because obviously you have the ability right now, subject to all the regular rules of the 15-day letters, et cetera, to return an application if it's not complete. And I think if you just took that out, it would probably help a little bit. The other thing I have is I don't quite understand how you're going to do a detailed cost estimate on a conceptual project, even if you can figure out whether you're going to fix the current building or tear it down and replace it. Neither one of those is going to, it's almost impossible to come up with an accurate, good, detailed cost estimate for a concept. I don't know why you need it. And besides that, if you took it out of here for the concept approval, you've already got it over on the other side. You've got an estimated project cost requirement on the concept approval already. You could expand it to say a summary estimate or something, I don't know. So you'd have a little bit more information, but I don't think you can get a detailed cost estimate. And the second part of that is, if you're filing a 5004, you already have that requirement, so it's redundant to have it on here for that issue on this one. And the last thing is, are you ready for comments about the 189, or shall I hold those off?
Not yet.
Pardon?
Hold on.
Okay.
Thank you. Is this on the...
I would just respond, Lyle, that we have been faring very well with the cost estimates we've received. And when we say detail, we're really emphasizing that lump sums can't be verified. Please give us detail, show that the process has been thought through and you've looked at the actual quantity and unit costs. And we've been very successful in getting good cost estimates. And again, except for the case of rehab, the replacement, whether it's full replacement or it's just partial, wherever you are on that, it's treated like a new construction project. And those are, I lost my train of thought, forgive me. The cost detail can be clearly determined to within at least a close proximity of reality, and you're not locked into that cost detail on your conceptual approval, but it gives the board a good idea of what they're giving a nod to. We can't just give them some vague term or no dollar term at all. We need to give them something that's pretty realistic. And so the detail that we've been getting from our architects and cost estimators has been quite good.
Fred.
Don, you said that it is a conceptual amount and it can go up?
Yes.
And I don't know what the board's comfort level of going up is. 50% more. And the concern is that as you develop something and trying to maintain that conceptual dollar amount, maybe something isn't getting done perhaps the right way or something else. So what is the process for readdressing the conceptual, if it's over 10%, 20%? Is
the conceptual approval goes to the board and we have an amount and we have a scope. When the project comes in for actual funding, it now has, let's say, DSA-approved plans. In this case, we pick a project, and we have a CD approval. We have everything for actual funding, and PVT revisits that and looks: is the scope the same? Did the cost go up? If so, why? Is it an inflator factor? Is the scope different? Has an area been added or been taken away? I mean, there are a lot of factors, but we do take a whole new look at that at the time of funding and determine that everything is still justified, and if not, why?
Okay, Mark, and then Bill.
For this question.
About 189,
on the first page of the form where you've got types of hazard, I guess I'd like staff to clarify for me the seismic category, because I don't understand how this works in relationship with the seismic regulations that we have. And I remember long ago Louisa saying that seismic was not a facility hardship.
It used to be.
In the old days, so I need some clarification on the...
The new regulations, the new program for seismic, it's a component of facility hardship. So if you meet the regulations, meet the new rules for seismic, you can come in and apply as a facility hardship. Yes.
Right. It's a new supplement as a result of Prop 1D providing for the seismic, that $199.5 million for seismic mitigation. That has been hung on to facility hardship 189.82A as another qualifying component within its own realm of qualifications. Is it a Category 2 building, et cetera?
Then we probably, and that was my question too, if this is the application form for the seismic program, is that what I heard you say, right? There's some pretty specific DSA approval requirements related to that probably should have their own checkbox.
In other words, on page 13.
I'm sorry, did I miss it? Well, I know it says, is it a seismic mitigation project?
Request for a seismic mitigation project.
I agree, but remember, what's required is not just, is a full DSA approval of the ground shaking and the blah, 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 and their approval of it as a project.
It's an excellent question. I totally understand where you're coming from. The reason there's not a separate box, like on the first page where it says replacement rehab, we don't have seismic there because seismic is either rehab or replacement. It's within those two because it's either greater or lesser than 50%.
I think Bill was also mentioning that there are additional requirements in the seismic program and that we don't have any check boxes for that.
What you might want to do is, the one where it says on 13, is this facility a seismic mitigation project? And then you check yes. And then as a sub under that, you would presumably have, provide the DSA documentation of the approved, I don't know what DSA gives you. What does DSA give you, Margie, when you've...
Ultimately, you get a letter.
Okay, so you would provide the DSA.
DSA has a form you have to...
Yes, yeah, I know the form, but there needs to be probably another box to check in there.
Wouldn't that be part of the DSA government concurrence, guys? That's where DSA would give us, part of their concurrence would state that this meets the requirements, it's the most vulnerable, meets the 1.7G.
But they don't comment upon the minimum work required in that letter. In their seismic approval, there's no reference in the seismic approval process under the current program and any of the information about the minimum work required.
It really follows this same format because once you're a Category 2 building, that's step one. It's a Category 2 building, but what are you going to do to mitigate it? What's the minimum work? And we're right back to where we are when we're trying to make a determination.
I agree. I don't disagree with you, but anyway, the comment would be set it up so that the process that DSA goes through, when they review it, whatever the product of that is, you provide that, and it may be a letter, but it's not the same letter that says you have, that's up here, because first of all, it doesn't reference the minimum work required. It just says that you meet the ground shaking, you meet the category type, and it's imminent collapse, right? Richard?
Well, there's three of them.
Yeah.
Well,
we've been working with DSA on that.
Okay, so the suggestion is...
We can definitely incorporate that and clarify that for the user.
I have another question, and it's a broader question. Are there interpretations of regulation at OPSC which would govern your response to the answers to these questions on the worksheet? So, for example, on the bottom of page 13, have affected facilities been vacated? If the district checked no, is the application rejected?
No.
Does it, well, and then so going back to my initial question in a broader sense, do you have internal guidelines of how you review this checklist?
No. I'm not sure what you're...
Well, in other words, how do you know how to approve and how to respond to the answers to the questions?
I don't follow.
So I can restate then, if a district, whether they check yes or no on facilities being vacated.
Or any other thing.
And how they're holding, just as an example, what does OPSC do with that information?
Yes, that's the question, essentially.
Well, I have a sort of a scuttlebutt, and that is, we've always been told that if you're going to file a facility hardship, you better vacate that building, or else it won't be considered to be urgent by OPSC. And so that's what the scuttlebutt is. So if you don't vacate that building, then it's not urgent enough to be a facility hardship. Don't know if that's true.
Right.
Or health and safety.
That's
because
not
of
always
it.
true.
Well, I'm just saying that's the scuttlebutt. So
Okay.
we have empty buildings.
Here's the answer to the scuttlebutt. We've approved many where they weren't vacated. And we will continue to approve them. That's not a requirement, but it does add credence to the district's request.
Thank you. Okay, so it does. Well, we don't want to kill Steve. Okay.
Yeah, just run for a minute, so just...
I'm sorry, I should be more... authoritative about that.
Ron from WLC Architects, just to make the form complete, with the line you have up here, each box not checked, please provide can't you just put a line below each one of these things here so that you can make a brief statement rather than have another sheet of paper that you have to attach to it?
Well, with most submittals, there's a cover letter anyway, and we could add extra lines and, make it another page.
I don't think you'd make it another page. You have a space between all these. If you had a line in there, you'd be able to say not applicable, for example, photos of the dirt,
Yeah.
I mean, it would keep everything together. Everything
It could
would
be more
together.
complex if you get
And then you would
into
refer to page something other. But I think you could take care of most of
It's
this
not
stuff.
a problem. We can
do that.
we can accommodate.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Sir? And then Richard?
Good afternoon, Joel Kirshenstein, Sage Institute, here on behalf of Inglewood Unified, Mesa, and a couple of other districts. Like Bruce, we've taken a number of facility hardship projects through the system, and certainly worked with most of the staff here, especially this gentleman and Fryad and others. And staff's always been incredibly cooperative and very, very helpful. I'd like to talk about the form issue. I think what you need to do is possibly make a determination on three components of a form similar to the private sector when you go into a building department. One is, what's the process? And I think the process has to be very, very clear because of the magnitude of a facility hardship application. It's not the typical application. So I think the process needs to be very clear. And then I think there's a predetermination that has to be made by someone who says, yeah, I do think you have a legitimate facility hardship issue. A predetermination. And the reason I'm saying that is because the final determination, there is that fiduciary responsibility. I agree with the two comments that were made. I think you do have to vacate a building the way the rules and regs are structured. I think once you get to a certain point, it's very tough for a board to say, well, I think the student should stay in that structure, or in one case, we have a play field that Fred's aware of that had to get vacated because it was a dangerous play field near a highway, and we had to vacate that. And as soon as that application went in, it became very clear that we had to vacate that. And when I say application, just the appeal. And it's a strange thing to file an appeal for something you really haven't filed anything for. So the process is a little awkward. The other piece of this form, which is why I came today, is the most exacerbating point, and that's funding. And I know you've been through this before, but I think the most critical part of this whole issue is putting in an application. Let's say we change it to an application, and you make a determination that this is a health, safety, and welfare hardship issue. The buildings have to be vacated. In the case of Inglewood, a whole school had to be moved to 2 acres on a campus. And it's 3-4 years later going through the process of getting all the different approvals. Once you do that, and then you show up to get your money, you're being told you're on a waiting list along with all other projects. I think you need to revisit that issue that you have visited before, because it's the only application that goes in that you have to make a determination on that it's not healthy for the kids to stay there. You got to leave the premises, and then you can't fund the project because issues come up like we have today, and yet there are funds around to support these hardships. I think the state's in a very dangerous situation saying you got to leave, but I'm not going to give you the money to fix that building. So that's why I came today, because of the word funding that's in here. I think it has to be very careful how that's used. And there's a lot of misinterpretation, and there was a lot of assumptions where districts thought that they would get funding, then the bond issues came up. We know what happened with that. But I think that your committee should revisit it and support these applications at the very end, saying that once approved, you will have a funding set aside for your facility, your health, safety, and welfare project. So those are two things about the form. I think I divided up into three, and I think you have to clarify the funding issue and hopefully say that once approved, you will be at the front of the list for funding. I think that's very unclear to school districts. So that's my presentation. If I can help, having been through it,
Juan would want to respond.
Just to clarify, Joel, so what you're saying is basically if you get if the board approves your project, it should not receive an unfunded approval, it should receive an apportionment.
That's correct.
Okay.
Especially when we ask to vacate an entire school.
And I think
That doesn't, even in financial hardship, that doesn't happen.
Right.
You know,
and we
You're saying leave, and when in Englewood, they're sitting on 2.5 acres, they have asphalt. Little Mesa School District had a vacated playfield, they don't have any playfields. And in both situations, the construction contracts are let.
Right.
And there's no funding. And Englewood was really exacerbated. They used their funding from 2 other projects, which were supposed to be the match for this, for 2 other funded projects that are on the unfunded list. And now they're out of money. And here we have a facility hardship and nowhere to go with it. So I think it has to be revisited as part of this, is my plea. Yes, sir.
If I could respond.
Yeah, just real quick, I think, I understand the question, the concern. It does go beyond the scope of creating a checklist.
I know.
It's much much more actually a serious issue that I don't think that this committee has anything or any authority to do anything about that, but.
The reason is because we were asked to use the appeal form to address this issue before the State Allocation Board. The same appeal form that you have for this. Staff, and I guess that's the only thing to do, but I'd like to work with staff, committees, to see if we can get support for issues like this. So.
As has been previously mentioned in front of the board and in this committee and by various members of the administration and different boards, there is a budget letter that's currently active. Apportionments for projects are not allowed at this time. So it's still active, it's still out there, bond funds aren't available.
That I understand, but I think that they need to be put at the forefront of that issue, even if there are deposits, which there are. There are deposits available. There's reserves, rather, that are available. When there is a project that's health, safety, and welfare, you say out of the building, that agency should be responsible for giving you the funding to put you back in the building. And I granted this stuff came up after these applications were filed. But I think it needs to be part of the process.
Correct. I understand your concerns, but I'm just reiterating that at this time,
I understand.
Apportionments are not allowed from various projects, not just within the school facilities program. With that at hand, they cannot make the apportionments. I understand that there may be funding available for active apportionments, but these are unfunded approvals. These cannot be active apportionments at this time.
I understand the policy. I disagree with it. I think you can find funding for these few projects. I really do. I think it's just everybody's bought into it and gone, well, that's great. There are none. But I think for when you're told by that agency out at that state, you got to get out, then they have to put you back in.
I don't think the state's telling anyone to move out. I haven't heard the state tell anyone to move out yet.
Well, these are state agencies.
No. And the administration.
I don't know about that.
And finance has shown with the administration's concurrence previously that we have made exceptions for the health and safety projects. There was an exempt list early on. So we do give credence to health and safety issues. But again, there are active budget letters. It is something that we do consider when making our decisions. But at this time, again, apportionments cannot be made.
I understand that.
And Joel, just to follow up, we do want to work with you. We understand your concern, and in terms of maybe presenting something to the board, because one of the things that came up, and actually this last board was a long board, but there was a report in there that talked about the current process of our unfunded list. And right now, facility hardships, we take unfunded approvals to each board on a monthly basis. Mm-hmm. And within those approvals for that month, we place them on the unfunded list based on the receive date. The only exception to that is facility hardships. Facility hardships go immediately to the top of that month's list. So that's something that we already do anyway, and you'll see that on our unfunded list. So understanding that there was a request.
And we did get moved because of a delay. So I'm very aware of the process. There was a delay with DTSC, and we did receive a letter last month, and we did get moved to that back date so that we would get that front position. Mm-hmm. So certainly, I know the effort that goes behind it. Just a little extra step is needed for something as exacerbating as this. So I believe I've been trying to hold the whole neighborhood back from showing up, so it's not easy. And there's a lot of elected folks that live in that neighborhood. And try to explain it to them, and some of them are in the legislature, they don't get it. But it's interesting. So anyway, I just thought I'd bring up those points, and if I can ever be of any help on it, let me know.
Thank you very much, Joe. Appreciate you coming up.
I do agree with Dennis from time to time. So.
Okay, Richard? One more.
Richard Gonzalez again, Richard Gonzalez and Associates. I'm a little confused. We have a seismic mitigation program that has a minimum threshold to file an application for. This would seem to be a supplemental to that, which would allow districts that have seismic issues that may not be able to file under the seismic mitigation program to get funding under the facility hardship.
No.
I'm sorry, you're saying no?
No, the only seismic that's allowed in facility hardship is under the seismic mitigation program.
Well, is that, could we have an understanding of that? My understanding is that there have been limited seismic upgrade projects that were approved as facility hardship projects in the past.
I know one.
It's my understanding that the difference between the two is that there's the determination of imminent health and safety. And for seismic mitigation, I think it's the potential collapse in the event of an earthquake. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but previously they wouldn't qualify under seismic mitigation because that component, the imminent health and safety, was hard to get to, versus now under the seismic mitigation program, you have more flexibility. Don, I'm sorry, you want?
May I speak to that? One of the qualifiers for facility hardship replacement or rehab is the answer to the question, is the building built according to the code of original construction? Now, some buildings have qualified for facility hardship, conceptual and then ultimate funding. Glendale comes to mind. And they did some structural strengthening that looked like the S word. And yet, they didn't qualify because it was seismic. They qualified because the building was out of code with original construction.
What about a building that was damaged by an earthquake? Hasn't the facility hardship program funded buildings that have been damaged?
If it's damaged, it's out of code with original construction. It can qualify for facility hardship.
I guess I'd like to share is that as a practitioner here, the concept of filing an application under the seismic mitigation program and filing a facility hardship request related to seismic issues is now becoming blurred. I am not sure now whether a district that has got a seismically unsafe building that might just miss the earthquake safety shaking factor would not be eligible to be funding, where a district that does not come close to meeting that shaking factor has a problem and now files under facility hardship. Where is that line drawn?
Again, and we'll have to get clarification, but it's been my understanding that they would not qualify unless they can demonstrate that there's an imminent health and safety. And that's why the seismic, not why, but one of the reasons why this separate program is created specifically for seismic. Because under the current rules for facility hardship, a seismic, and again, it depends on what we talk about when we talk about seismic, but the potential, the eventual, or the potential for a collapse in the event of an earthquake. But there's other buildings, there's other facilities that have an imminent health and safety now, not in case something happens.
And I think Don mentioned the other piece, which is whether there were conditions not known at the time of the building's original construction. So that there were, and that's what I heard him say was how. Well,
it's not my implication that they weren't known at original construction. It's that the condition of the building now, we don't look at, it's not up to code today. We can't address that. We can't do it even yesterday. But if the code at the time it was built, it doesn't meet that code, It's not out of code with.
But in that case,
whatever reason.
you could essentially do a seismic project, not calling it a seismic project.
Susan?
Don, do you want to finish your point? No? Okay. Go ahead.
Just on the seismic, there have been facility hardships for flood, which are conditional upon water happening, so it could be very analogous to seismic, which is, probably, I can think of at least 2 or 3 that were flood-related.
We'll have to check. Again, it's my understanding that we haven't had any, but we'll check for seismic under the old rules.
Well, and I guess what I'm sharing is that using the term seismic in this format is
confusing,
blurs the line between the seismic mitigation program and what would be considered to be a structural deficiency of the building. And I think maybe you'd want to keep those separated.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Clarify, yeah.
Sure.
DSA has a specific form number that
It might, seismic is a term relating to the ground shaking. Is the lateral force resisting qualities of the building is what saves the building. Maybe seismic, I think, as Juan was saying, relating to the seismic bond fund availability in the program there is seismic. Other would be just maybe a different term might be better used to describe that. To eliminate some of the confusion. If you have an older building that may have, that doesn't meet current code, it may meet the code under which it was designed and built, but something may have happened over time to diminish the structural carrying capacity of beams or columns or whatever. Then it's a structural issue. And it could be gravity and not necessarily lateral loads. And so I think it would be worthwhile to keep the seismic with the seismic program, because otherwise people start talking about stuff that doesn't really, like the blurred line, like Richard was talking about. It could end up being confusing if we could break it apart a little bit, that would be helpful.
What I'm hearing them say, though, is that the intent here is that this will become the OPSC application form for the seismic mitigation program. Yeah, I definitely heard that.
It works in...
Because right now, if you apply, first you go to DSA, and then you go to OPSC and you file 189 and 5004, right? For the state's seismic program. And the intent is that this is an application form for hardship of which the seismic mitigation program is a subset. So I don't think it's a bad goal. I think you should probably create a separate area in here or box or whatever that specifically references seismic mitigation program, and then the documents received from DSA indicating compliance under the regulations, to clarify that piece.
So you want to get through the
So where we at, Don?
All right. Again, I'll just pick it up where I left off. We were looking at a corrective plan, which sounds redundant with when we've already talked about industry specialist report and so on, but keep in mind that this is, again, a guideline, and there's a lot of different types of animals out there. They're not all structural, they're not all mold. We've had some doozies. If you had time, we could tell you stories. So what is the proposed remedy? We just want to know that the district has talked this over with their board. What options did they consider, and why did they pick the one that they think is the least expensive? Show us what process they went through, and just help us understand, really, how they got to this point of recommending this particular mitigation method.
If you're only going to fund the minimum work required, what do you care what corrective plan the district has chosen?
Can you say it back to me? I'm hard of hearing, I'm sorry.
Well, we care because then, for example,
But you're only going to fund the some minimum amount, and you said you could do more work than that, right?
Right, but we also don't want to fund, just because we've determined or they've determined what the minimum work is necessary, or say DSA did, and we can determine with cost estimates how much that's going to cost. If the district has a different plan that
that's less, or that's not going to really mitigate the problem, we don't want to present that for approval.
I could give an example.
No, I understood his answer.
Just a quick example, let's say you have an old school that has been encroached upon by development, and now the highway is just perilously close to the school and the students. And the district says that this is a terrible problem, and we thought it through, and we want to move, tear down the buildings and move them all back, 50 feet, 100 feet, whatever. And yet, it may be that there's room for a berm wall that could be constructed, and that would, of course, be a lot less expensive. That's just an example. And maybe that hadn't been considered. So just, I'll keep going if there aren't any questions at this point. The detailed cost estimate, we touched on that earlier. We just like it broken out and specific to the minimum to mitigate the problem. And a site diagram, it could be as simple as your fire drill map, and just highlight the buildings that are affected, show us what the square footage area that's involved, help us see what is toilet and other, because that's how we can determine the current replacement cost. It doesn't need to be an expensively produced plan.
Tom, the minimum cost to mitigate the problem, that could be expanded to beyond the cost of the problem, whether there's ADA access that's related, that's triggered beyond the problem, off-site, the second traffic light 3 blocks away, that is part of the queuing system of the one immediately to cure the problem. So how, is there
A good thing, Fred, to keep in mind is that the funding, if the project qualifies, let's say as a facility hardship, it's treated just like new construction. So the parameters, new construction, they'd allow for a path of travel to a point, but there's a limit, just like off-site is to the center of the road, 2 sides, et cetera, et cetera. Those things would all apply just like new construction. Does that answer?
Right, so the answer in some cases could be, no, that second traffic light is not allowed. It is upon the district then to bear that cost to mitigate the problem, I guess, and that's just how the works out. Yeah, now on that, if a facility hardship district borrows money, that's not held against them for the future project? It's not counted as match or anything like that? Is that? A facility, a financial hardship district, there's no state money to solve this problem that everyone agrees is bad. They go out and borrow $2 million, if they can get someone to loan it to them, to fix the problem. Is that held against them on future funds available, or how's that count? Is that?
Not sure. Jason, would you know?
Are you talking like a bridge financing?
Yeah, I guess, or.
Microphone. Oh.
Sorry to put you on the spot, Jace.
That'll teach me. Jason Hernandez, financial hardship supervisor. To answer your question, Fred, if you had your conceptual approval, you've gone to the board, and obviously you're unfunded because there's no apportionments right now, then you could go through the same process that the regular SFP hardship districts do and move forward, whether it's interfund borrowing that you can do through one of the other funds, or if you're going to get some form of bridge financing, you can do that also to move those projects.
Now, do they have priority in the financial hardship program to get their applications approved first, or the?
Yeah. Whenever we get a project that is facility hardship, we flag it. So I'll put it on the workload, but I'll put it on the top and not put it to the normal list, where a normal project, even though they're all priority because they are financial hardship, we bump those ones up because we realize that these ones need to get to the board as quickly as possible.
Quick question on the same thing, Jason. If they move ahead with the bridge financing before they have the facility hardship approval, is it then included as available funds? They have to have the approval first before they?
Well, the policy that was approved by the board was for projects that either got an inactive apportionment or an unfunded approval. It may be something we look at possibly on a case-by-case. I couldn't answer yes or no. But the policy itself was developed for the projects that already had their approval.
Yeah, I think if these are health and safety issues, it would be a good idea to take a look at that. They may need to move ahead with interim financing. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, I'll just continue as quickly as I can.
Is there,
Thank you, Jason.
have we gone over some of these? We've kind of skipped around, so is there some that we've talked
rest of
about?
it's easily.
For example, the photos, we kind of talked about not needing a photo for a burned down building,
Since
that kind of
it's
thing.
getting late, does anyone have any questions on?
Yeah, I was just going to say,
Commander?
I think we've covered like the issue on seismic, the facilities being vacated. I don't know if there's anything else. Do we want to just open it up to questions on the rest of them, or do you want Dawn to go
Any
through what's
particular line item that
committee?
you have a question on?
Yes, Dennis.
Just out of curiosity, why would it be important to know whether this is in litigation or not, or pursuing litigation? I mean, what impact does that have on the
Money.
application?
One of the provisions of the board's approval then would be that proceeds of the litigation would be returned to the state, up to a certain amount.
Through section 1, you can look at each line. We'll just give you time to just look at those, and if you have questions, rather than me read it and take time. Do you have any questions?
Another quick question, Don. What's the purpose of knowing the permanent and portable classrooms?
That's just helpful on the big picture. Sometimes it factors in the write-up, and it just helps us facilitate the write-up, and if the district has that information, can easily provide it.
Portables are excluded.
The main thing, though, thank you for reminding me, there has to be an ongoing unmet need. That's in the first sentence of the regulations, 1859.82A, an ongoing unmet need. And the capacity of classrooms, enrollment, we look at that, and on paper, is there still a need? This helps us to quickly make that determination.
I guess I'm just curious. I understand that part of it. I'm just curious as to what the difference between the permanent and the portable in this case would be. I could understand, in terms of cost, if you had a lab or something that was more costly to replace than just a standard classroom. But what permanent portable?
It's not required information. It's just helpful.
Data gathering, just trying to get more information to projects that we're doing. Not necessary.
Can we just take a minute to talk about what you just sort of mentioned on the side there? How are you saying related to an ongoing unmet need? Is that what I heard you say?
There needs to be some growth because it's just like new construction. We can't repair a building, no matter how bad it is, if it's not needed on paper.
So when you say growth?
No, in other words, if there are only 100 kids at this elementary school, and you've got 8 classrooms, and you've got 2 of these classrooms. Okay, let's do some mental math here. You've got 8 classrooms, twice as many classrooms as you need for the 100 kids, and 2 of those classrooms have some serious facility hardship issues. There is not an ongoing unmet need. There's no justification for those classrooms, and the district, you may very well have a health and safety threat in those classrooms. But if you don't have the pupils to, even necessitate the classrooms, that's the idea.
What's the process for determining that?
It's just the standard loading standard.
So do you require a submission of eligibility for no?
Well, if you're applying for facility hardship, baseline eligibility has to be established. And then we simply look at that based on current enrollment at the site.
And so if there's negative eligibility in the district, would you deny the application?
Sometimes we've done a prorate. It just depends on the individual situation. Sometimes we've been able to justify because there's unique circumstances.
You look at it by high school attendance area, by district-wide, depending on how you've done it, right?
Typically site-specific. It depends on if there are nearby sites that the students could attend, or is it remote? I mean, a lot of factors.
Well, I mean, it strikes me that if this is meant to be an overall application for the program, you might want to include information or the requirement to submit all that documentation. Or do you guys just, you have all that in-house already, in theory? It's not an application, it's a checklist.
Or in that quick trip to CD's website will give us some of that information too.
Okay. But so there's actually a lot more here than is really on this. That's what I'm hearing. Okay.
We do some of the work.
I do have a clarifying question though about that, because I was surprised to hear that. So if my NPR is all molded out and it needs to be replaced or rehabbed, but my school is only half full because of declining enrollment, you would only...
Purpose of it is different.
Okay, so MEF is different, minimum essential facilities is different, so you would help me with the NPR, you wouldn't prorate my NPR or my admin?
No. Okay. Even if it's larger than what the regulation is saying?
I'm not asking that question.
So.
That's a good question, is it?
You know, the whole 60% measure or whatever those things were.
I'm sorry, say it again.
No, say the multi-purpose room is 10,000 feet or whatever it is. I think you would tie it to the 1859.83 chart that would say it's 5,200 feet or whatever it is at elementary school. So if Margie has 10,000 square feet of bad multi-purpose room, but the MEF chart says 5,200 feet or whatever it says, you would replace up to 50.
Up to what the maximum MEF would provide for.
5,200, not what she has.
Yeah, whatever the MEF would provide for based on the number of students.
Right, so, with it, replaced up to a...
Yeah, that's how we deal with core facilities.
So it would behoove us to transfer kids in to that school before seabed's time, okay, to get...
Into the teaming space.
Into the bad school, okay.
Thanks.
We didn't hear that. All right. Just in conclusion, Section 2 just provides more information. This is completed only for conceptual. If it's a funding request, none of this is needed because this information is already on the 5004. But since a 5004 would no longer be submitted, nor would a 189, this information addresses that, and so that we have that information. And again, it's just to help us see the big picture and understand how to address it, and just to present it to the board and show the board the big picture and all the components, all the factors that come into play for the district's need and their request. And so that pretty much summarizes that. And then, again, if I could just fast forward to the 189. Ed, really?
Sorry, I just wanted to summarize kind of the things we've agreed upon, and I have a list, and I know I've missed one or two, but if we can just, how we're going to deal with this. Richard, did you have a comment before we start?
Would like to leave him to finish his comments because mine would follow this.
Okay.
189.
Oh, okay. If I could just summarize on the checklist. Of course, we all agree that the intent is that it to be user-friendly, that I was so good, I think. User-friendly, and it's used to collect documentation that's typically, that staff typically uses to analyze the request and to hopefully to facilitate the processing of those applications. Okay, and we wanted to clarify that it's a checklist, so therefore an application is not turned back if all the boxes are not checked. And whenever there's a question, we're going to put it in the beginning. We're going to advise in prominent print that if you have any questions regarding the form, the checklist, or the process, or the application, you should contact your OPSC staff person. And we're going to have a link to the site that talks about the this facility hardship, whether or not districts they can use it to determine perhaps at least on a preliminary basis whether or not they might have a facility hardship project. That we wanted to emphasize that no certification is allowed, and I'm not sure if we decided whether or not we were going to eliminate the signature altogether. The point being that the signature is for a contact person that staff can use to, if they have any questions, and it's not a certification per se. And I don't know if that needs to be clarified more.
That actually can just go at the top, like when we apply for a program, you put the district contact and your name and your email and your phone number as opposed to a signature at
Right,
the
because
bottom.
right now it looks like a certification. Is that
Yeah,
it?
so you can
Okay.
put it at the top,
Okay, is that,
The seismic was a clarification on.
I'm getting there. I need clarification on that. So.
I have a broader question about this. Is this an application form?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply.
That's the right answer, Juan. But, I mean, in a sense, you're saying no, but the discussion today has fully related to the fact that it will become the application form, if you will, for the program. I mean, that's really what we've talked about all day long.
Application form that literally does not exist for facility hardship.
But, I'm sorry.
An application form does not exist, and nor does this propose to be one.
Well, and I see that in the write-up in the very beginning on page 11, and I understand why you're doing that, I think, which is to avoid having to go through a regulatory process. I assume that's right.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, I would go back to the notion that if you're going to have a program, and it's a special program, and it has its own requirements for submission and everything, that you're clearly delineating on the checklist, and it looks like a form, it smells like a form.
It's a duck.
Okay, sorry. It's just, and the other piece of it is you're also saying that the Form SAB 189 is not part of the school facilities program either, on page 11.
Mm-hmm.
And you're proposing modifications to that with no regulatory change, approval, process, etc. I don't know, it seems kind of funny.
That's not a form either, right? The 189?
It's a form, but not incorporated.
It's not in regulation. That one's a form, but it's not in regulation.
Okay.
So it's not required?
Which one?
It's a
189.
No, the checklist isn't, but the components maybe.
Anyway,
It's really a guideline on how to accomplish the end result. How can we help you? Help us help you.
Well, let me ask the question. If I'm applying for the program and I don't submit the checklist, you won't accept the application, will you?
As long as you give us the documents that are on, for most of them, then yeah.
You will? Well, so we're not required to use this to submit to the program?
I say that jokingly, but
I'm just asking.
All joking aside.
Okay.
We do want, again, this is...
So this is the required document to participate in this program?
This will facilitate processing your request. If you leave it off, it takes longer to analyze it and find the components, and it's just, this is a tool for you to help us help you.
But it is the intention that this is going to be required with any facility hardship submittal.
And I think it's a good idea. I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but it's just you're doing something that's actually beyond what you're saying you're doing. And you're creating an application form for the program. I don't mind signing on the bottom of it. I don't have a problem with that. If I provide the information, I'll sign it, the district rep. But that part doesn't, the certification or whatever. But, I mean, it strikes me that you're creating an application form for a state program. Because you're telling me that if I don't submit this, you're not going to process my application.
And that gets back to my earlier comment. I mean, you have all of this, and this is good information. We've heard from a number of people, and I agree. This is good information. It's good that the districts have this, but in the format that it is presented, it is basically an application form. And, like you said, it's a duck.
So what other form could it be that wouldn't make it
Well, it's already there. Yeah, Don said, all this information is already there in the handbook on the website.
Except that the current process is to use a 5004 and a 189. And we want to get away from that.
Is that in the regulations?
Is what in the regulations?
What you just said, the current process.
No.
Is that, that's not in regulation?
No.
Then why don't we just stop using the 5004 and the 189?
Thank you very much.
Without all this the checklist being submitted.
The checklist, I don't want to say it for the 1,000th time, and I'm going to say it. It's intended to be helpful. It's intended to be a tool to help everybody. And if there is a district out there that refuses to use it, but it's going to give us all the information anyway, but just does not want to touch that piece of paper, I think we would be okay with that. If there's a district out there that wants to go that route.
But it's not in their best
Okay, we're making so much progress.
Sorry,
I don't know what happened here.
We just got a little sideways. I mean, because I went back to the staff comments on page 11. Well, then let me read one other staff comment on page 11, because what I heard the staff say originally was, this will be a substitute for the 189 and the 5004. But in fact, in your write-up, you state that we're modifying the 189 so that the districts can submit it and indicate the law, regulation, or policy that supports the request.
It's for a separate type of a request, Bill. That's only for appeals.
So
we're trying to separate the two. Okay, for a facility, before we had one form for everything. Okay, now when I say everything, I'm talking about facility hardships, appeals. That's a 189. So understanding that the 189 really doesn't help us, doesn't help districts identify or, well, with the exception of the narrative, to identify the components for a facility hardship, we didn't think that it was appropriate or useful to have a 189 for a facility hardship request. Instead, keep the 189 for appeals. We deny something, you're appealing something, the true sense of an appeal, and separate the facility hardship and create this checklist, this tool, to help you identify the components that are needed for a specific facility hardship.
So Wanda, we would be submitting this form instead of a 189?
Yes.
Okay, and that's...
So it's an application, so it is.
It's fine. You write up clearly, the staff comments and the way they're written, if you read them, they have logical sequence that indicates we're modifying the 189 to make it clear what type of request. We use the word request. And anyway, I'm fine with it. It's just the way it's presented in your write-up is not really what you're saying your intent is.
I could see where it would take you there. It's almost a coincidence. It's just almost an afterthought, because the 189 originally was required to apply for a facility hardship, and we believe that it's inappropriate. The 189 should just be used for appeals.
And I think I agree with you.
And so, because we started off in our processing to change the 189 to incorporate facility hardship, we realized it was preposterous. And so let's just keep the 189, and then let's create something that works for the district that's simple.
Okay, and we are, in our district, the most famous phrase is that no good deed goes unpunished, okay?
Is that quite a bit?
Yes, I'm sure you do. So, but I guess following up on Margie's comment, and this is not about the 189, it's about the checklist. The checklist appears to be an application for the program, and if it's an application for the program, why don't you just call it that?
I think so. Give it a number. Yeah, give it a number. Give it a number.
Okay, Dennis.
And you mentioned that this is not absolutely necessary to be filed. If a district chooses not to submit the checklist, they don't need to file that, okay? If they choose not to do that, then what is their application process? If you're eliminating the 5004...
It would be in their best interest then to use this checklist.
I mean, they could do... No, I'm serious. All joking aside, I'm very serious about this. If this is not an application and a district chooses not
to... If they wanted to take an alternate route and they wanted to submit a nice cover letter to us with all the supporting documentation tabbed behind it in a nice binder,
Can we,
Okay?
right, can we agree to work on the language in the write-up and be more clear about what the
And
intent
then if
is
there's
and
information that's...
semantics?
If
Yeah.
there's information that's requested on this sheet that the district doesn't provide in its submittal, then we have to write a letter to get that information and go back and forth.
Right. We're really trying to simplify and streamline.
We could do that. We could do that.
Yeah, but a cover letter could be sent in lieu of that, sure.
Okay, can we, oh wait, so we'll work on the language and being consistent about what we're asking for and what it is. If it's a duck, if it's whatever it is. Okay.
Susan, did I just say that somebody did a really good job getting this to this point to be discussed and resolved? I mean,
Yeah,
somebody
thank
should be
you.
congratulated. This
Great.
is a good effort.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Go ahead. Yeah. Thanks, Patty. Come on up.
I'm sorry, but the conversation has already been derailed. I'm a little confused because I think we're getting mixed messages about the requirement of the checklist. I understand, I've heard staff say that the checklist isn't required, but if you read on stamp page 11, under the background, one of the last sentences there, it says, when a district submits a 5004 or funding application, the checklist is required to be submitted with that application. So just speaking to what Bill mentioned earlier, it smells like an application for facility hardship. So, we'd like some clarification on that. And if in fact there is some flexibility about whether or not a district has to submit the checklist with or without a funding application, I think that needs to be made clear.
Okay, we'll clarify that and bring it back for discussion.
All right. Thank you, Patty. Bruce?
Are we talking about the 189 itself?
Not yet. We're there. We're almost there. We're almost there. Just, okay.
Quick
I have
question.
Okay.
Quick question. If we are going to revisit this, I think the write-up says that this is on the website now and it will be required as of October 1st.
December, yes, okay.
Will that be postponed?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
That was just staff proposes. Assuming all goes swimmingly, which never happens, so.
All right, two more things, I think. We're going to add the DSA under the industry specialist report. That was early on. No? Oh, that's what I meant. I'm sorry. Licensed architect, not DSA. Oh, come on. Okay, all right, see. Okay, and then there was discussion about seismic and to separate it out, perhaps having a new box, seismic mitigation program.
Yeah,
Is that?
clarify that.
Okay. Anything else on that one?
Ron Prigman wanted lines added underneath for the other.
I'm sorry?
A member of the audience.
Oh,
Under each of the supporting documentation types, just saying, if not applicable, explain, and then, provide a line for the district to explain why it's
Okay.
not included.
All right, thank you. I think, there was one more, I think, I'm sorry, you didn't have? Okay, all right. All right, thank you very much, and we'll go on to 189.
Okay, we've already touched on the 189. It's essentially the same form that we've had for eons. It only has had changed on page 16 for your reference. The basis of request that is immediately under purpose of request, that's the only change that we've made, and we just wanted to bring it to your attention since it was loosely related to the facility hardship changes. And so we simply ask the district to identify the law, reg, or SAB policy or other that it believes supports its request. And that can be a PO request for anything, but it would no longer be required for a facility hardship.
I'm sorry, no longer what?
Would no longer be required to request a facility hardship.
Okay.
So would our facilities hardship application still go to the appeals team then? Where
Yes.
does it go? Wait, so it's an appeals team item, but we don't
We're not
file the
appeals.
appeal?
The policy and specials team.
Just for clarification, so within the description, they currently have to cite the law, the regulation, the board policy on the current 189 in the description anywhere?
No.
Okay.
We can make up anything we want. Put it there.
And hope it's there.
Just have a couple of questions. How does who does OPSC automatically grant all requests to appeal, or how does the appeal process?
I haven't seen it work that way yet.
Okay, could you just give me a rough outline of how the appeal process works? What are the internal guidelines?
Typically, a district appeals something that's been denied.
Right.
That's usually the precipitating factor, and it doesn't fit one of the typical program niches. And they say, well, wait a minute, this is special, and we want you to consider our request. And so the appeal form is a vehicle for putting that request before the board.
Is OPSC mandated or required to accept an appeal and take it forward, or do they have discretion to reject an appeal?
Everything is appealable.
To the board or to OPSC?
Pardon?
I mean, so, in other words, if we submit an appeal, you must take it to the state allocation board?
Unless it's it can be administratively resolved.
It can be administratively resolved?
Yes.
Okay. And that process occurs a lot? I don't really know the process. Huh?
And in some cases, we might communicate to a district that although we could continue to take that forward, it may be, I'm just saying there are situations where the board simply doesn't have the authority to grant their request. And so it would be a futile effort to take it before the board.
And you're talking about legal authority, right, Don?
I'm talking about what?
The board may not have the legal authority, is that what you mean?
The board may not have legal authority.
As opposed to the political authority? I'm sorry.
I'm just giving that as an example. There's many different variables where a request... But, technically, everything's appealable, but is it always in the district's best interest to go forward with that? And many times, to administrative resolve is always our desire. We would much rather do that if it's at all possible.
Okay, Bruce, please.
Bruce Hancock, Dennis Park. If I can just speak quickly to this last issue and then maybe just the thing I originally had my hand up about and be quick about it. First of all, I'm very appreciative of hearing these statements about the items going before the allocation board because I definitely do agree that the staff has no authority to keep anything from the board, but that has in fact happened. Districts have been refused the ability to take an appeal to the board. I know of at least 2 cases in the last year which I could provide information on. So I'm very happy to hear that while there may be many good reasons why a district shouldn't go forward, and in fact it may be the staff's and the staff's attorney's opinion that the board does not have the authority to grant the request, in the end, only the board can decide that, not the staff and not the attorney for the board, in my opinion. So I'm glad to hear that position stated by staff, because I certainly concur with it. And then on just a much more mundane aspect, I cannot remember on the 189 why we had the fiscal section on the 189. I'm probably the one who put it on there, but
Nobody else knows why it's on there.
And so I would like just a discussion if it's necessary. Obviously, if the appeal in in some way had a financial hardship aspect to it, that might be different. But if it doesn't, I don't remember anymore why that's on there and whether it should be on there. Thank you.
Okay, Lyle and Richard, do you want to come up together?
We'll argue here.
Lyle Smoot, LA Unified. I'm glad Bruce brought it up because I was going to ask the same question, and the reason it was put on the form and the reason I don't think it has any validity today is because it was put on the form, and I'd like to blame Bruce for it, but I think it was one of his hiatus points. Under the lease purchase program, the lease purchase program was a 100% state-funded program. The way you got down to 50-50 or some other percentages for a while was a matter of priorities. But at one point, the legislature decided that they didn't like the idea that a district would come forth with a facility hardship, a replacement project or a fixing project. And even though they had a lot of money in their local coffers and they had a lot of developer fee money, they weren't going to provide any of the money for the replacement project themselves. It was actually put in law that when you submitted a project application under certain conditions, that information would be put forth to the staff and provided to the State Allocation Board. And I don't remember now if it gave the board the authority to make them do 50-50 or some other percentage. I think what it did is it just said, when you come and ask for it, you got to give us this information so we know if you're being pig at the trough. And that's why I was there, and it's no longer valid because, and I can't imagine what you would do with the information, because the only valid reason for the information is to determine if you're a financial hardship project, and if you are, you've already gone through that process or you're going to go through it at the same time. So it's just information is no longer needed on this form, and I'd love to see it dumped. Thank you.
Juan and then Richard?
Thank you. It's just one of the things that we were looking at when we were reviewing these changes. But good suggestions. Thank you. Will we consider? Of course, if we don't have any of, actually, I think a lot of the peers that we see don't have any of this information filled out anyway. So thank you. We'll consider removing it.
Nix it.
Give you more room to actually write a description of the real problem.
Saves paper.
Richard Gonzalez again, of Richard Gonzalez and Associates. I was going to ask originally if we couldn't just simply get rid of that little section there too, because it seemed like it was part of the old program. I think to add to this comment and on the form, this program is run entirely by law and by regulation. There are no, to my knowledge, there are no SAB adopted policy papers. There are some actions on the part of the board. So I'm not sure how I would respond to SAB policy. I do know that there are written documents prepared by OPSC, which are procedural and being able to provide guidance on the regulations and the law. But I'm not so sure where I would seek out where the board-approved SAB policies are.
So if the wording instead was prior SAB action, I think that's getting at what the intent of that part was.
Well, I think that might be.
I don't think we were referring to.
I would avoid considering anything that may or may not have been considered a precedent-setting item by the board, or the board having said, no, this is not a precedent-setting item. I think that it's better to take a stance of just saying, here's our law, here's our regulations, what is the basis of your appeal that's related to those items which have gone through the legislature or through the administrative law process. I think that's the basis, the nucleus of this program, as opposed to policy papers.
Okay, and I think it's just a matter of the choice of words. I don't think we were referring to, an officiating body, adopting a resolution or setting a policy in place. I think we were just talking about maybe there's some prior board action that leads you to believe that your case is similar and should be decided the same way.
I would say that might be a good reflection. I think that would be something that should be brought up as part of the overall discussion of the issue paper, along with staff and board members if necessary. Not necessarily something that would need to be part of the appeal body of the language. Maybe paraphrased, if there was a similar action and they happen to reference it like we do today, the San Ramon solution on abandonment replacement of portables, which, that's an informal type of thing. Isn't that right?
For clarification, you primarily have an issue with the word policy. Because you're thinking of lease purchase program when policy was rampant.
Well, when policy was the order of the day.
Order of the day.
I think that all the appeals, in my personal opinion, and this is my personal opinion, is that all appeals should be related to law or board regulation.
So you're suggesting just to strike this line?
I suggest striking both lines. We either are in compliance with the law and the board's regulations, or we're not.
And so then, by extension, you're saying that inherently, if there was some prior board action, we can safely assume it was based on law or regulation?
Yes, sir. And if there is a regulation, or a law that wasn't addressed here, then obviously the answer would be that this isn't covered in either law or regulation, and then it's up to the board members to decide whether there needs to be a direction.
So for clarification, your suggestion would be to strike the SAB policy.
And other specified.
And other.
I'd like to leave other in, at least we could add common sense there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll consider removing the SAB policy, but I think the other specify helps out.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, are there any other comments on the 189 issue? Okay, we're going to consider removing the fiscal information section since it seems to have been based on the prior program, the lease purchase program, and to eliminate the SAB policy section on the stamp page 16. My understanding is that what I'm hearing is that it was going to be considered. I didn't hear that we were, but good suggestions. Thank you for the history. Wow, appreciate it. Okay, anything else? The good of the order? Oh.
Great job by the staff. Thank you.
All right, yes, thank you. As always, thank you. All right, let the record show we're closing 5 minutes early. Have a happy weekend, everybody. Thank you. Thanks.